In today's Farm Report, the El Nino effect is ongoing, and it could impact U.S. and world agriculture. Gary Crawford with the U.S. Department of Agriculture has more.
A new Climate Prediction Center forecast about the current El Nino gives us
slightly increased odds of El Nino persisting through the spring of 2016.
Agriculture Department meteorologist Brad Rippey says forecasters have upped those odds from 80% already to 85%. In the U.S., possible effects would be most troubling for farmers in the Northwest, where it's already extremely dry and usually with a strong El Nino.
We don't expect much rain or snow in states like Washington, Oregon, and Idaho, and that could be really catastrophic.
However, for drought areas of California, an El Nino usually brings on big storms, lots of rain, a good snowpack buildup, but flooding rains this winter for folks in Southern California, the Southern Plains, and along the Gulf Coast. But what about El Nino's effects on farm production in other countries that compete with U.S. farmers? South America, for example. USDA meteorologist Mark Brusberg covers that part of the world. He said yield histories for corn and soybeans in Argentina show that in most El Nino years,
you would tend to see an above-trend yield. They could see a second bumper crop in a row for both corn and soybeans.
But in Brazil,
because the crops are spread out over a longer period of time and over different climate zones, you don't really see the El Nino impact in yields.
Now, across the Pacific to Australia, farmers there have reason to be nervous.
There have been some very serious droughts in Australia during an El Nino.
But not in every El Nino year.
But historically, more times than not.
Causing reductions in Australia's wheat crop. Now into Southeast Asia, where in past El Nino years, rice production has taken a hit.
I think we're going to see that this year as well.
Agriculture Department meteorologist Brian Morris. Typically, but not always, El Nino brings on dryness in places like Thailand, Vietnam, Indonesia, the Philippines, causing rice production to fall. And he says already
the Philippines have worried about their internal crops, so they're talking about more imports for them. You're talking about reduced rice in Thailand. They're down significantly.
Could be down almost 1 million tons below last year.
And that's a big chunk of rice coming off the market there. So between Philippines trying to bring in more for them and Thailand producing less, it definitely has a major impact on supplies.
But not a catastrophic impact on world rice production, which right now, at least USDA analysts say could be 0.5% more than last year. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington. The Consumer Price Index this week shows basically no inflation during July for goods and services in the overall economy, but food at the grocery store, that's a different story.
We're paying 0.2% more for groceries in July than we did in June.
Economist Anne-Marie Coons tracks food prices for the Agriculture Department. Several products helping to push the index down last month, such as, and we haven't said this very often, such as beef.
Beef and veal prices fell overall from June to July by 0.4%. We still are paying 10% more for these products than we did last year.
Also down last month, fresh produce prices, which in July were 0.7% less than in June.
And 2.9% less than last July.
However, egg prices, they keep going up.
Egg prices increased an additional 2.6% from June to July. And this was after we saw a 17.8% increase last month.
Ouch. Bird flu took out millions of egg-laying hens a few months ago. That caused a drop in egg production. Gary Crawford for the U.S. Department of Agriculture, Washington.
The USDA recently released a report that shows increased land values, but also increased expenses. Cindy Zimmerman with AgriPulse has more.
Farmland values are up 2.4% this year compared to last year, according to the latest report from USDA. Troy Joshua of USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Service says cropland values were up only slightly.
The average value of U.S. cropland was $4,130 per acre, an increase of $30 per acre, or you can say 0.7% since 2014.
Joshua says the value of cropland varied from a 9% increase in the Southern Plains to a 2% decrease in the Corn Belt.
In much of the country, the change in cropland values were less than 5%. In 7 states, cropland increased more than 5% in value. In Texas, South Dakota, and Oklahoma, which is heavily in cattle, those increased just under 10%.
Another new report from USDA shows a significant increase in farm expenditures since 2014.
U.S. farmers spent $397.6 billion on agricultural production, up 8.3% from 2013. This is the largest increase since 2008.
Feed costs for livestock producers were up more than 16%, but crop farmers had higher expenses.
The largest increase in production expenditures was in the Plains region, which includes states such as Kansas and Texas. In that region, expenditure rose by $11.6 billion from 2013.
Reporting for AgriPulse, I'm Cindy Zimmerman.
Although year over year, dairy imports are expected down over 6%, USDA adjusted its forecast in that category due to increased demand last month.
The increase in imports of 500 million pounds in 2015 and 400 million pounds in 2016, it's really a butter and cheese demand story in the U.S. where prices have been quite solid for those two products.
World Agricultural Outlook Board Chair Seth Meyer says price forecasts were lowered from last month in most milk categories.
And that gets you to an all milk price down 35 cents this year and down 60 cents next year.
But one exception is a rise in butter prices predicted for 2016.
What we're seeing is a little bit of milk flowing from the butter churns to the cheese vats based upon better profitability in the cheese vats. And part of this is really soft NDM prices kind of weighing on the profitability of butter and NDM production.
With non-fat dry milk product prices lowered to move it in the export market. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.